People believe Budweiser is in the business of selling fermented grain and water. They are wrong. Budweiser is in the business of owning the American identity, one 60-minute window at a time. We call it the king of beers, yet the paradox is that its throne is not built on the quality of the liquid inside the bottle, but on the mastery of the airwaves above our heads. This is not a story about brewing. This is a story about the strategic colonization of the American mind. It is the second Sunday in February in a quiet suburb outside of Phoenix, Arizona. The outside temperature is a comfortable 68 degrees Fahrenheit, but inside the living rooms of 115 million Americans, the atmosphere is electric. This is Super Bowl Sunday, the unofficial high holy day of the American empire. On the coffee table, nestled between mountains of buffalo wings and bags of chips from Walmart, sits a cold can of Budweiser. To the average viewer, this is just a drink. To a strategic mastermind, this is the result of a multi-billion-dollar siege that has lasted for decades. Do you truly believe that you chose this beer because of its flavor profile? Or did a $7 million advertisement for 30 seconds of your time convince you that your patriotism is measured in 12-ounce increments? The reality is that Budweiser does not compete with other beers. It competes with the national anthem for a place in your soul. While other brands are trying to move the needle on taste, Budweiser is moving the needle on cultural sovereignty. Consider the scale of this operation. Every year, Anheuser-Busch InBev spends more on marketing than some small nations produce in their entire annual gross domestic product. They are not just buying airtime, they are buying the monopoly on sentiment. When you see the Clydesdales galloping through the snow to the sound of a swelling orchestra, your brain is not processing a product, it is processing a legacy. Those horses weigh over 2,000 pounds each, and their presence is a calculated psychological anchor. We are told they represent tradition, but in the cold light of the boardroom, they represent a barrier to entry that no craft brewery could ever hope to climb. Is this a display of corporate affection for the American public? Or is it a ruthless calculation designed to ensure that the concept of beer and the concept of America are inseparable in your subconscious? People think the Super Bowl is a football game where companies happen to show commercials. The truth is that the Super Bowl is a massive advertising delivery system where a football game happens to take place in the background. Budweiser is not a sponsor. It is the architect of the experience. Think about your local Starbucks drive-thru. You go there for the consistency. You know exactly what the coffee will taste like in Seattle or in Miami. Budweiser has applied this same logic of industrial scale to the most volatile of all things, which is human emotion. They have mapped out every mile of the American highway system to ensure that their red and white logo is as ubiquitous as the pavement itself. They are not just selling a beverage, they are selling a sense of belonging to a tribe of 330 million people. We often praise this brand for its heartwarming stories of puppies and horses, calling it the gold standard of marketing. But if we look closer, we see the cold reality of a data-driven predator. This efficiency is not an accident. It is a byproduct of an algorithm designed to extract the maximum amount of profit from every single televised second. Every tear you shed during a commercial has been budgeted. Every nostalgic smile has a calculated return on investment. Does this brand represent the rugged individualism of the American spirit? Or is it the ultimate symbol of a consolidated corporate machine that has turned our shared culture into a commodity? We like to think we are immune to the influence of a talking frog or a majestic horse. Yet, the data shows a different story. The bottom line is that Budweiser has successfully convinced a nation that a mass-produced, highly processed liquid is the essential ingredient for a meaningful life. The paradox is staggering. A company that is now owned by a global conglomerate based in Belgium still manages to wrap itself in the stars and stripes so tightly that we forget its origins. We see the red, white, and blue, and we ignore the billions of dollars flowing out of our pockets and into a global treasury. We are not just consumers, we are the fuel for a machine that never stops growing. As we sit there watching the game, we are part of a grand design that was drawn up long before we were born. The beer in your hand is the physical manifestation of a strategic victory that was won in the 1930s and reinforced every year since. But to understand how they achieved this level of dominance, we must look beyond the bright lights of the stadium. We must examine the blueprint of power that allows a single brand to hold an entire country in its grip. This is not about a game of football, this is about a game of chess played on a global scale where we are the pieces and the board is the American heartland. How did they build this fortress of influence? Was it through better brewing or through the systematic elimination of choice? To find the answer, we have to look at the invisible walls they have built around the American market. The celebration you see on the screen is merely a mask for a much more calculated reality. We have been invited to the party, but we are the ones paying for the decorations. This all leads us back to a singular moment in time when the strategy was first forged in the fires of necessity. That bizarre scene we just witnessed in the living rooms of millions is no accident. It is merely a corner of a blueprint that was drawn with surgical precision decades ago. Most people look at a Clydesdale horse and see tradition or a heartwarming animal. I look at that horse and see a 5-ton kinetic barrier designed to crush any competitor who lacks a billion-dollar war chest. This is the blueprint of power. To understand how Budweiser became the oxygen of the American social landscape, we must analyze the 3 masterstrokes that built their empire. We are not talking about a stroke of luck or a clever slogan. We are talking about the systematic construction of a cultural monopoly. First, let us examine the strategy I call the fortress of exclusivity. For over 30 years, Anheuser-Busch held an iron grip as the sole alcohol advertiser during the Super Bowl national broadcast. While every other brand in the world was fighting for the scraps of local airtime or digital leftovers, Budweiser owned the national soul for 4 hours every February. Is this simply a savvy marketing move, or is it a strategic blockade designed to starve the competition of the very air they need to breathe? The answer lies in the numbers. When you own the exclusive rights to the most watched event in human history, you are not just selling beer. You are buying the ability to delete your rivals from the collective consciousness. This is the bottom line. If you can buy all the mirrors in the room, nobody can see anyone but you. Consider the ballpark figure of their investment. Over the last decade, they have spent more than $500 million on Super Bowl ads alone. That is not just a marketing budget. It is a tax they pay to maintain their sovereignty over the American weekend. This capital fortress ensures that a craft brewery in Colorado or a regional player in Pennsylvania never even gets a seat at the table. They are playing checkers while Budweiser is busy owning the entire board and the room it sits in. Second, we must deconstruct the logistics of ubiquity. Their distribution network is not a service. It is a physical manifestation of dominance. Their trucks travel hundreds of millions of miles every single year. They have ensured that from the most remote hunting cabin in the snowy woods of Maine to the sun-drenched beaches of Malibu, a cold Budweiser is never more than a few minutes away. They have mapped the American geography more accurately than the United States Geological Survey. Does this omnipresence exist to serve the consumer, or is it a calculated move to ensure that convenience becomes a form of soft coercion? Think about your local Walmart parking lot. It is massive, sprawling, and designed to make you feel the scale of the corporation. Budweiser has applied that same sense of scale to the entire continent. They have built a psychological moat that is thousands of miles wide. When you walk into a gas station in the middle of a Nebraska cornfield, you do not see a diverse selection of artisanal beverages. You see a wall of red, white, and blue. That is not a choice. That is a result of a vertical integration strategy that has turned every retail shelf in America into a piece of occupied territory. Third, we arrive at the weaponization of the American identity. This is perhaps their most chilling masterstroke. They realized early on that selling fermented liquid is a low-margin game with infinite substitutes. However, selling the feeling of being an American is a high-margin monopoly. They didn't just want you to have skin in the game, they wanted to own the game itself. They took the imagery of the American worker, the American veteran, and the American farmer, and they distilled it into a 12-ounce aluminum can. This is the principle of the invisible chain. By tying their brand to the national identity, they made it socially expensive to choose anything else. When you hold a Budweiser at a backyard barbecue on the 4th of July, you are not just holding a drink. You are holding a social credential. But is this a genuine tribute to the nation? Or is it a cold-blooded appropriation of shared values to drive a quarterly earnings report? They have successfully convinced 330 million people that their liquid is the official lubricant of democracy. Let us visualize the scale of this power. If you took all the cash Anheuser-Busch has spent on marketing since the 1980s and stacked it in $1 bills, you could build a tower that reaches far past the clouds, higher than any skyscraper in New York City. You could pave a 4-lane highway of cash from the Atlantic to the Pacific and still have enough left over to buy every single radio station in the Midwest. This is not innovation in the way Silicon Valley defines it. This is the application of overwhelming capital to ensure that choice becomes an illusion. They have moved the needle so far that the brand and the culture have fused into a single entity. In the boardrooms of St. Louis and Leuven, they do not talk about hops or barley. They talk about market share and mind share. They analyze the data of your emotional triggers with the same cold intensity that a hedge fund analyzes the stock market. Every commercial is a laboratory-tested experiment in human behavior. They know exactly how many seconds of a golden retriever puppy it takes to make you forget about the industrial processing plants that produce their product by the millions of gallons. We are told that this is the American dream in a bottle, but when you look at the blueprint, you see something much more calculated. You see a system designed to eliminate friction, eliminate competition, and eventually eliminate the need for you to think at all. The Super Bowl ads are not just entertainment, they are the victory laps of a conqueror who has already won the war. But this massive castle of influence was not built in a day. To truly understand the ruthlessness of this design, we must go back to the beginning. We must see the first bricks that were laid in a time of desperation and chaos. This entire empire, with its billions of dollars and millions of miles of influence, started with a single, cold-blooded decision made long before the first television was ever turned on. That origin story is not a fairy tale. It is a manual for survival in a world that shows no mercy to the weak. The blueprint is clear. The fortress is built. The population is captured. Now we must look at the foundation beneath the concrete. We must travel back to the moment when a struggling brewery decided that being a beer company was not enough, and that becoming a legend was the only way to avoid extinction. The massive fortress we analyzed in the previous stage did not emerge from a void. It was built brick by brick upon a foundation of cold logic that was laid more than 140 years ago. To understand the king of beers, we must look past the neon signs and the Super Bowl glitz to the humidity of St. Louis in the late 1870s. This is not a story of a man with a dream. This is a story of a man who saw a structural defect in the American market and decided to exploit it with surgical precision. Adolphus Busch was not a master brewer. He was a master of the machine. At that time, the American beer market was a fragmented mess of thousands of local players. Beer was a local commodity because it spoiled within miles of the brewery. If you lived in Chicago, you drank Chicago beer. If you lived in New York, you drank New York beer. This was the physical law of the 19th century. But Adolphus Busch refused to accept these boundaries. He looked at the vast, expanding American frontier and saw not a wilderness, but a logistical challenge. While his competitors were focused on the flavor of their mash, Busch was focused on the physics of heat and the geometry of the railroad. Do you think Budweiser became a national icon because it tasted better than the thousands of other beers available at the time? Or was it because Busch was the first to realize that technology could be used as a weapon to achieve total market domination? He was the first American brewer to use pasteurization. This was not a move to improve health. It was a move to extend the shelf life of his product so it could survive a journey of 2,000 miles in a rail car. He didn't want to make the best beer in St. Louis. He wanted to make the only beer that could reach every corner of the United States without turning into vinegar. This was the birth of the ruthless efficiency that defines the brand today. He invested in a fleet of refrigerated rail cars, a move that was considered a massive gamble at the time. He had a significant amount of skin in the game, but to Busch, it wasn't a gamble. It was a calculation. He knew that if he could solve the problem of distance, he could turn every local brewery in America into a relic of the past. He was the original disruptor long before that term became a buzzword in Silicon Valley. Think about the modern-day Amazon fulfillment center. We marvel at their ability to deliver a package to your door in less than 24 hours. Adolphus Busch was doing the same thing in the 1880s with heavy wooden barrels and steam engines. He mapped out the American landscape with the same cold intensity that an algorithm uses today. He understood that whoever controlled the cold chain controlled the market. This is the genetic code of Budweiser. It is a brand built on the total annihilation of distance and the systematic destruction of local competition. Is this a story of a visionary entrepreneur bringing a product to the masses? Or is it the chronicle of a predator who used superior technology to starve out thousands of small businesses across the American heartland? When Busch sent his refrigerated cars into a new territory, he wasn't just bringing beer. He was bringing an economic death sentence to every local brewer who couldn't afford a fleet of ice-cooled trains. This was the strategic bloodbath of the 19th century, fought not with bullets, but with ice and iron. But the true test of this ruthless DNA came in 1920. Prohibition arrived like a sudden winter, and for most breweries, it was the end of the line. Over 1,000 breweries across America closed their doors and never reopened. They were victims of a changing moral landscape. But Budweiser did not panic. They did not mourn. Instead, they applied the same cold-blooded logic of survival that had made them a national powerhouse. They pivoted with the speed of a lean startup. They used their massive infrastructure to produce anything and everything that was legal. They made ginger ale, they made root beer, they made malt extract, and even refrigerated cabinets. They didn't care about the product, they cared about the survival of the system. While other brewers were holding on to their traditions and fading into history, Anheuser-Busch was busy maintaining their refrigerated network and their fleet of trucks. The bottom line is that when the 21st Amendment was ratified in 1933, most of their competitors were gone. Their buildings were empty shells and their equipment was rusted junk. Was this a desperate attempt to keep a family legacy alive? Or was it a calculated waiting game, designed to ensure they were the only ones standing when the law inevitably changed? But Budweiser was ready. They didn't just walk back into the market, they sprinted. They sent a team of Clydesdales to the White House to deliver the first legal case of beer to President Roosevelt. It was a masterstroke of theater that masked a cold reality. They had used 13 years of national sobriety to consolidate their power and ensure that when America started drinking again, they would have no choice but to drink Budweiser. This is the modern echo of that era. Today, when you see Budweiser using massive data sets to predict which television show you will watch or which social media post you will engage with, you are seeing the direct descendant of the refrigerated rail car. They are still obsessed with the elimination of friction. They are still using technology to ensure that their product is the default choice for 330 million people. We see this in the way they manage their current supply chain. They operate 12 massive breweries in the United States, strategically placed to ensure that no point in the country is more than a few hundred miles from a fresh supply of beer. They have turned the entire geography of North America into an optimized grid. This is not about the art of brewing. This is about the science of presence. They have built a system that is so large and so efficient that it has its own gravity. Does this brand represent the spirit of American resilience and survival? Or is it a chilling reminder that in the world of global business, the only thing that matters is the ability to outlast and outspend everyone else? We like to tell ourselves stories about the quality of our favorite products, but the history of Budweiser tells us a different truth. It tells us that power is not granted, it is engineered. It is the result of thousands of small, cold-blooded decisions made in the pursuit of total market sovereignty. The seeds were planted in the 19th century, and they were watered during the dry years of Prohibition. By the time the first Super Bowl kicked off in 1967, the machine was already unstoppable. The DNA of the brand had been fully formed. It was a DNA of conquest, of logistics, and of the absolute refusal to allow any competitor a single inch of ground. But as the machine grew, it needed more than just ice and rail cars. It needed to evolve into something even more pervasive. It needed to move from the physical world of trucks and barrels into the digital world of bits and bytes. The genetic code of Adolphus Busch was about to be translated into the language of the algorithm. We are about to see how this physical monster transformed itself into an invisible ghost that haunts our every decision. Those small choices from the past have now manifested into a colossal entity of steel and fiber optics. The refrigerated rail cars of the 19th century have evolved into a global nervous system that operates with the cold precision of a predator. We are no longer talking about a brewery. We are talking about a logistical machine that has mapped the American subconscious and turned the act of consumption into a predictable data point. This is the algorithm of domination. To understand how they maintain their grip on the American heartland, we must deconstruct the three technical pillars that make their empire impossible to challenge. First, let us examine the precision grid. Budweiser operates 12 massive breweries across the United States, from the historic brick walls of St. Louis to the sprawling modern complexes in Fort Collins and Newark. This is not just about production capacity, it is about a strategic occupation of the physical landscape. Each brewery is a hub in a network designed to ensure that no American consumer is more than a few hundred miles away from a fresh supply of liquid. They have turned the entire geography of North America into an optimized grid where distance is a variable they have already solved. Is this a miracle of modern engineering designed to ensure the highest quality for the consumer? Or is it a physical blockade that uses the sheer scale of its infrastructure to make competition a mathematical impossibility? When you operate on this scale, the cost of shipping becomes a weapon. Budweiser can move 1 million barrels of beer across state lines for a fraction of what a local craft brewer pays to move a single pallet to the next town. They are not just selling beer, they are selling the total elimination of logistical friction. They have achieved zero marginal cost in the most expensive part of the business, which is moving heavy liquid across vast distances. Second, we must look at the sensory algorithm. In the age of big data, Budweiser is not guessing what you want. They are calculating it. They spend hundreds of millions of dollars every year on consumer research that goes far beyond simple taste tests. They analyze the gait of a Clydesdale horse, the specific frequency of a puppy's bark, and the exact shade of red that triggers a sense of belonging in the human brain. They have mapped the emotional triggers of 330 million people with the same clinical intensity that a pharmaceutical company uses to map a virus. Do you truly believe that you enjoy those Super Bowl commercials because they are artistic? Or have they been engineered to release a specific sequence of neurochemicals that bond the brand to your sense of family, home, and country? Every frame of their advertising is a data-driven intervention. They know that a 30-second window during the game is the most expensive real estate on Earth, and they treat it with the cold efficiency of a high-frequency trader. They are not looking for fans, they are looking for behavioral compliance. The bottom line is that they have turned our shared culture into a laboratory where they are the lead scientists and we are the subjects. Consider the ballpark figure of their data harvesting. Every time you engage with a brand post or scan a code on a package at a stadium, you are feeding a machine that never sleeps. They track the temperature in your city, the local sports scores, and even the sentiment of your social media posts to determine exactly when to push an advertisement to your phone. They have built a psychological moat so deep and so wide that you cannot even see the other side. They have moved the needle from influence to environmental control. You do not just buy Budweiser, you exist within a world they have curated for you. Third, we arrive at the retail siege. This is where the algorithm meets the pavement. In the United States, beer is sold through a complex three-tier system that was originally designed to prevent monopolies. However, Budweiser has mastered the art of vertical integration within those legal boundaries. They exert an overwhelming influence over distributors and retailers. When you walk into your local liquor store or a massive supermarket like Kroger, the layout you see is not accidental. It is the result of a ruthless negotiation for shelf space. Budweiser uses its massive capital to ensure that its products occupy the eye-level real estate, the end caps of aisles, and the prime spots in the refrigerated cases. They use data to prove to retailers that their products have the highest turnover, effectively forcing smaller competitors to the bottom shelves or into the dark corners of the store. This is the principle of the invisible monopoly. They do not have to own the store to control what you buy. They just have to own the data that tells the store owner what to sell. Does this represent the ultimate triumph of the free market? Or is it a systemic distortion that has turned the concept of consumer choice into a carefully managed illusion? We like to think that we have the freedom to pick any bottle on the shelf, but when 90% of the shelf is occupied by the products of a single global conglomerate, is that truly a choice? The algorithm has determined that you will see their red and white logo 10,000 times before you even think about buying a drink. By the time you reach for the handle of the cooler, the war for your mind has already been won. Think about the North American daily life. You see the logo on the jersey of your favorite athlete. You see it on the billboard over the New Jersey Turnpike. You see it on the screen of the gas station pump while you fill your truck. This ubiquity is not a byproduct of success. It is the primary engine of their dominance. They have built a system that is so pervasive that it has become part of the background radiation of American life. They are as much a part of the landscape as the Rocky Mountains or the Mississippi River. This level of optimization comes with a cost. To maintain this machine, they must constantly feed it more capital and more data. They have become a prisoner of their own efficiency. They cannot afford a single minute of downtime or a single % of market share loss. This is why their strategic choices are becoming increasingly desperate and aggressive. They are not just competing for your business, they are fighting for the survival of an ecosystem that requires total domination to function. The machine is now perfect. It can manufacture, ship, and sell millions of units with the push of a button. It can predict your desires before you even feel them. But a perfect machine is not built to stand still. It is built to expand. It is built to crush anything that dares to stand in its way. Now that the engine is fully operational, we are about to witness how it was used to clear the battlefield of all remaining resistance. The strategy is about to shift from construction to conquest. We are moving from the era of the blueprint to the era of the bloodbath. In the high-stakes boardrooms of the 1980s and 90s, the air was thick with the scent of a coming slaughter. While the public was distracted by funny commercials and catchy slogans, a strategic bloodbath was being orchestrated to ensure that no rival could ever move the needle against the king of beers. This was not a friendly competition between neighbors. This was a war of attrition where the goal was the total colonization of the American palate. At the dawn of this era, the landscape was occupied by formidable rivals like Miller and Coors. They believed they were in a marketing war, a battle of images and television ratings. They were wrong. They were looking at a local map while Anheuser-Busch was looking at a global chessboard. Was this a fair fight between equals? The reality is that Budweiser did not want to share the market. They wanted to own the air that their competitors breathed. Every year that a rival was kept off the national stage, their brand equity eroded. They were relegated to the sidelines, watching as the king of beers marched down the middle of the field with a team of 2,000-pound horses and a multi-million-dollar orchestra. The second masterstroke was the manipulation of the gatekeepers. They effectively turned the independent distribution network into an extension of their own corporate body. Imagine a small craft brewer in a quiet town in Oregon. They make a product with superior ingredients and local passion. But when they try to get their product onto the shelf of a major retailer, they find that the distributor is too busy managing the 10,000 cases of Budweiser that just arrived. The small brewer is told there is no room in the truck or no space on the shelf. This is the purge by efficiency. In 2008, the world witnessed the merger of Anheuser-Busch and InBev. This was not just a financial transaction. They applied the same cold logic of cost-cutting and operational efficiency that had worked in America to the entire planet. They turned beer into a zero-sum game. For every dollar a competitor spends on production, Budweiser spends 60 cents. This 40% gap is not a margin of error. It is a death sentence for the competition. Is this the natural evolution of a successful business? Or is it a systemic destruction of the diversity that once defined the American market? The celebration is over. Now we are faced with a bill as heavy as the trophies the empire has won. Every movement of a giant creates friction. Every massive output of energy leaves a scar. In the pursuit of a world with zero marginal cost, the system has begun to treat the people who run it as mere variables in a complex equation. Every year, this massive organization consumes billions of gallons of water, much of it drawn from local aquifers in regions that are increasingly prone to drought. Is this the inevitable result of a successful global enterprise? Or is it a sign that the system has grown so large that it is no longer capable of existing in harmony with the world around it? They have successfully merged their DNA with the very concept of the United States. The first lesson is the law of invisible chains. Budweiser understood before anyone else that branding is a social tax. They are no longer waiting for you to get thirsty. They are using data to predict when you will reach the point of no return in your decision-making process. Budweiser has shown us that the ultimate victory is not to win the competition, but to become the environment in which the competition takes place. You are the final piece of the puzzle. You are the reason the blueprint exists. This was behind the logo.